second paragraph down, and essentially we've been speaking continuously here about this power of speech. We then took it into the davening, and we explained how the speech can amplify your kavanah tremendously, and your understanding of the godliness in your soul when after you've meditated for a long time, and then you speak the words actually out in davening, and you know the perush of the milos, and you know what you're saying, then the seichel and the depth of the hisbonos is even greater. We said it's even greater than the hisbonos itself. In other words, you can meditate for a long hour, and when you speak, all of a sudden it increases. And more than that, we said that the power that resides in your soul, the light of Elokus that comes into your soul, even if you meditate for a short time, right? But you put in the perush of the milos, and you say the words with the chozek, it's even stronger godliness than if you would have meditated for a very long time and not said them, right? So just over and over explaining how this speech triggers some higher source and then amplifies an extra hashpah from the original source more than you had to begin with.
This is a contradiction of the way davening is often done. They do this kind of silent thing, and really the speaking it out is far more powerful than this sort of internal meditation thing going on.
Okay, so you were here in the last class, right? Yeah, we spoke about it. Okay, exactly. And then we prided ourselves that it's not quiet davening around here, Baruch Hashem. Okay, so Tam B'Kol Zeh, we're going to start from inside. The reason for all of this, basically, when he says all of this, is all the different examples that we gave throughout the last many days about the power of speech. Why? Through speech specifically, it shines and is revealed the penimius and the depth of the light of the intellect, which never comes out by mere meditation in the mind, etc. Also, we said that it's not okay. Then we said that it's not only the depth of the penimius of the light, but also the length and the width, and all the different manners that we explained what those things were. The length being comes out in all different types of possibilities and details that you had never seen before without speaking. All of this in the ofen of the orech and the rochev and the ofen gilui haseichel, the manner in which the intelligence comes out. Sheba b'dibur ba'ofen yoser naila. All of the levels, depth, length, and width, it all comes out in speech in a much deeper way. Kanal, as we said earlier. V'chein b'midos. The same is true as with the emotion. Just like your intellect is increased, we spoke about how your love could be increased, your anger would be increased or decreased if you stop speaking. Hatam b'kol zeh, the reason for all these analogies and all these examples, hu mitzad mailas hadibur b'shorsho shelamayla gam b'shorsho makar haseichel. It's because of the source of speech, right? The quality of speech in its source is above even the source and the root of intellect itself. It's a very strange thing, right? Intellect seemingly is our greatest power. It's what makes a human being, right? Rashi even says that what is unique about man amongst all the animals? We have this dea, right? But he also says, actually it's interesting, Rashi, if you look in the first Chumash, he says there, dea v'dibur. Right, that knowledge, but also speech. But the idea is that the speech itself has a source higher than the source of our own knowledge. Yeah. Do we say what? Are you talking about a particular word? Oh, hispalus? Yeah. Basically, it's not arousal exactly. It's like a activated. Affected is a good word. Yeah, thank you.
I would say that speech is like the most human characteristics. Like in the combination between animal and man, one day he says himself like a parrot because he can speak without actually knowing what it is. Like that's the part of human that's in the animal kingdom.
Could be, but here we're saying that in the human being, right, our faculty of speech is higher than it comes from a higher source than the faculty of intellect. Let's look into this. What does it mean?
Isn't it called? Do we sometimes call? Do we sometimes call it chaye mediva, like animal that goes like man, and we say like man is like the level of man. Speaker.
Medaber. Yes, that's what we're called. The speaker. Kiyudua the shoresh ha'osios. And what is the story? How is it that speech has a higher source than intellect? You wouldn't really think that. Kiyudua the shoresh ha'osios hem bechinas hakeser shlemayla mechochma. So getting dialed in is because speech comes from keser, which is higher than chochma. Ubenefesh ubechinas atzmus hanefesh shlemayla mikoch hachochma shaba. And if you're talking about spheros, you're talking about keser. But if you're talking about just the soul, then the keser refers to the essence of the soul, which is higher than the intellect of the soul. The intellect of the soul, as with all the other 10 spheres of the soul, those are powers that the soul wields. But it's not the soul. The soul itself is sort of beyond any of its particular powers, right? It's the, sort of the essence of the soul, which is just your basic life force. That life force then sort of cloaks itself or expresses itself in different ways that essential life force could communicate, whether be through intellect or whether it be through emotions or etc. But the idea is that the essential life force itself we refer to as the keser, the essence of the soul, and this is where speech comes from, higher than the intellect. And now we can sort of, because of that, we can understand something we said earlier when we talked about the koach hamaskil. Someone remind me what that is. Dial into the spheros. What is the spheros? Chochma of Keser. Right? What does it mean, Chochma of Keser? That in Keser itself, which is above Chochma, right? So what does it mean that there's a Chochma of Keser? If we're talking about the realm of Keser, it's beyond intellect. So why is it called Chochma in Keser? Because we're saying that when Chochma comes out of Keser, where it is actual intellect, it had some source inside of the essence of the soul. So therefore, what was its source? It was the Chochma of the Keser. In other words, it was just sort of something which was designed to create Chochma, and we call this the Koach HaMaskil. Haskala, or Seichel, is the name for an idea. Maskil is the verb form, which means to make an idea. So it's the Koach HaMaskil, it's the power to make ideas. It's beyond the ideas themselves. That's what we're saying right now, that the letters of Dibur are machrichim. What does machrichim mean? They force, right? That the koach hamaskil lavo begilui. Somehow, right, remember we said when you speak, why is it that suddenly you're amplified in your amount of information and intelligence inside of the speech? We said because you go back to the source of which is the koach hamaskil, right? Which was what made the idea in the first place, and you make it give out more energy. Remember that? Do you remember this? The koach hamaskil is what made is like sort of dropped the chokhmah into your mind at first. Then you develop that chokhmah in your mind, right? Merely into its full depth, length, and width, etc. And strangely, when you speak it out, it has an extra pulse of length, width, and depth of intellect. How did that happen? Because the words themselves went back, triggered the koach hamaskil and forced it, essentially, to give more hashpah into that original idea. Right? The koach hamaskil, when it first gave the chokhmah idea, it only gave from its chitzonius, right? So it gave you a drop. The panemius of that idea did not come out yet. Only when you speak, the letters of speech go back to the koach hamaskil and make it give more hashpah into that idea. So the question is, what is it that makes the koach hamaskil and forces it to kick out more information and more intelligence into that original idea, so that you're all of a sudden saying more intelligent things than you thought? And we're saying that the fact that the letters of speech come from the very essence of the soul, right? L'chein osius hadibur hemachrichim. They're the things that force the koach hamaskil to come and reveal itself. That which the koach hamaskil, when it was just working on its own, so to speak, bringing the idea into your head before speech came into the Inyan, it didn't give that much information. right? Because you basically trigger and rattle the source when you use the letters of speech, and it makes it push out more information. It basically, you force the koach hamaskil by speaking the letters to bring out more of the idea into your head and then into your mouth. Yeah.
I was thinking, it's kind of like the idea of like a Freudian slip, where you kind of without your consent, you accidentally say something that's truer than you meant to say. Is it? I don't know. I just thought is that kind of like related? Whereas like
I don't know if it's. I mean, a Freudian slip is sort of by accident. I don't think this is by accident per se. Your actual intellect is working harder. It could be very intentional. It's just that you didn't think that deeply when you were thinking by yourself without the speech. It's not just happens to pop out. Like Freudian slip is sort of. It seems like it's less intentional. There's not so much intellect involved in that. No, it's almost like just like a random. You could say that it was. I literally didn't even mean to say that. That's not what I meant. It just popped out of my mouth. I'm not sure it's at that level, because I'm sure there's sort of some. I don't know what that is. That's like sort of a different sort of thing. But I'm talking about when you're actually giving over serious information intentionally. All of a sudden, you have deeper ideas. So, and how does it show up? You have answers to questions that you didn't even ask yourself. That often happens, right? When you come and prepare a shir, especially dynamic shir, where people are asking questions. So you didn't know the answer yourself when the question was asked. But as you speak it, something happens where you suddenly are producing this answer, which if you had it, you would have said it in the first place. You wouldn't have left the class in a situation where that piece of information wasn't known. So what happens when you speak? Say it again.
I was saying this, but it is like that level, like drawn through the intellect.
Yeah.
It's not accessible.
Right. It's not accessible without speech. Yes, something about the speech itself makes the source of intellect have this outpouring of deeper intellect. That's what we're saying, right? And it's basically the letters force the koach hamaskil, which is its source, to come out. Okay, now let's understand deeper. Bira inyan hu. So to understand this whole matter, we're going to get to an interesting topic here. Hine l'chora yifla kol inyan hamshachas haor. The Yuridaso Mashiyoru Ba La'ayir Bekelim V'Osios. This is a very general idea, which we should have been asking ourselves all this time. We talk about light in vessels. There's a major question on the table. I think we have covered it here and there. Seemingly, it's a wonder. The whole concept of the notion of drawing down light and its descent, that it descends and comes to shine into the vessels and the letters. In other words, he's just saying this whole concept of light shining out to fill in the letters and sort of use them to express itself, right? As light does, right? When you're saying anything, what you're essentially doing is the light of, let's say, of your intellect or the light of your emotion is shining through the osios, which are like kalim, and what he's saying is that should ever happen is kind of a wonder and needs to be understood. That light even decides to come down and shine into vessels at all. Why is that so strange? Shezeu hepech tivo. Because if you think about what light, all the things you know about light, it is the opposite of the nature of light to really want to shine down and occupy vessels. Why? The teba or hula los lamaila. Because the nature of light is to go up. Right? Lidabek likalel makoro, and to cling and to become unified with its source. In other words, the real nature of light is not to come out, right? It doesn't want to come out because the nature of light is that it is something which is kissing, clinging, and trying to go inside of Hashem.
Fire.
Like fire, yeah. Fire is a perfect example. Why does fire go up? According to, Jewish understanding of physics, the medieval understanding of physics, as the Rambam says. He says because there's a source called the Yesod Ha'esh, which is under the moon, okay? And basically, this piece of fire that you hatch down in this world, it's basic. Every second, it's trying to become back inside of its source. It doesn't feel a natural experience being outside of its source. Therefore, it's going up in order to reclaim its proper place where it belongs inside of its source. It's also why the neshama is called a ner, right? Ner nishmas adam, ner havaya nishmas adam. The candle of God is your soul. Why literally it's broad. Why do we shuckle when we learn, when we daven? We're always like shuckling around. What are we doing over there? It's because our soul's not really happy being in our body. And just like a flame, it's sort of trying to get back to its source. And this is what we just had, right? The Eish Zara of Nadav and Avihu from the Parsha. Like if you're really the holiest person on the earth, you would seemingly leave your body. Right? We're coming up on the Hilula of Rabbi Shimon. We talked about it on Shabbos. Like the kiss of Hashem, right? They call it the Nashika, is that you basically go back to your source where you belong. At every second that you're in your body sort of al karchacha atachai, against your will you're living. The soul wants to be back where it goes. Even think about the whole light of Bereshis, that there is even a light. Why do we say that Hashem has to mechadesh b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh Bereshis? He has to continuously put the world back into existence every second. Why do we say that? Because it doesn't want to be here. It's against the nature of light to come out and be in anything. The natural state of existence is for existence to not be, or for it to be in its source, and there's no expression whatsoever. Why does light shine when it's totally the opposite of what light wants to do? That's the question. And we talk about light shining in vessels all day long. Do we ever ask ourselves, why is this even happening? It's not what light wants to do. It's against light's position to shine.
That's an example of like flame, but like light from the sun is coming. We would perceive it as streaming down.
We perceive it as streaming down. We have the same question. We have the same question there. First of all, light is clinging to its source.
It's going out of its source.
It's and so is everything's going out of its source. Light, right, is going out of its source, but the question is why? It's not its natural instinct. That's what we're saying. Light wants to be inside of its source. This is what the nature of light is. It's clinging to its source. Even when it comes out, at least the way Jewish Kabbalah perceives it, is that it doesn't walk away. In other words, vessels, they come out of their source and they just they distance themselves from their source. The light is attached, right? And why is it attached? Because its whole thing is like it's pointing to its source. Its whole existence is that it is getting chayash from the fact that it's connected to its source. Why is it running away from its source? I'm agreeing. Of course, everyone knows light runs away from its source. The question is why? It doesn't make any sense. It's not what light wants to do. Yeah.
How about like that kind of light? Like,
So you have to say that in English.
how about the filling light? Like the light.
All light has the same nature. Whether it's sovev or mamale, it wants to be inside of its source. The question is why does it run out of its source?
I think the same reason for this as that.
All light.
I'm not really understanding this.
Why does light shine? It's not the nature of light to go outside of its source. It's the nature of light to be one with it. Just like the soul, right? We can understand a little bit. The soul's like uncomfortable in the body. It would rather be where it belongs, in its source. It's like a fish out of water, basically, right? It doesn't want to be out of its source. It clings, it longs at every second. Give me water, give me water. I want to be with godliness, right? And here it's like we think of light naturally because of what light is busy doing, which is shining in a totally opposite way of what light should be doing, right? We sort of got used to the fact that light is like a constant fish out of water. So you think fish belong out of water. Light does not belong in a state of shininess. It belongs in a state of being inter-included in its source. You just got used to the fact that there's fish out of water. Like you get used to the fact that you're sitting here running around in a human body. We can get used to it, but as you said the other day, it's very uncomfortable. Right? We're actually not exactly happy here. If you don't get busy like doing something positive with yourself, it's torture to be outside of our source, right? Yeah.
Even in the modern idea of physics, you kind of see this with light that say comes out of the sun. But as soon as it hits literally anything, it reflects back. That's what it does. That's what we see. Like a dust in space. If the sunlight catches some of that, immediately it starts running back to where it came from. So you kind of, it seems to me that's what it wants to do in the first place.
Isn't it come out of the light from like an explosion of like, and then because it's like forced out of its source almost, right? As well.
It's actually
Machrichim.
the photons released when the electron orbitals go from a higher energy state to a lower energy
No,
state.
that's like
So Rabbi,
electricity.
with the neshama in the body,
No,
how, if it doesn't want to be there, wants to return to Hashem,
Yeah.
so how does that express in life?
They're also released when
I'm saying like you're.
photons. No, that's
How does it express in life that you don't want to be in your body?
The neshama doesn't want to be in the body. It's being pulsed there.
Right.
Like is the neshama being kept there just like the world is being sustained every moment? The neshama is being pulsed into your body every moment by Hashem.
Yes, it is.
Or is it the neshama went into your body when you were born?
No,
at
it's
some
of course
point,
no.
and then
It's being, of course, it's coming every second. All of existence, you're not different. Your body's part of existence, and the light in your body, and including the light of your soul, has to be put there every second for sure.
every second.
Yeah.
So how does that like?
So we feel a need to go. It's called ratzov v'shov, right? Like when you daven, like there's a satisfying concept. Or Shabbos, for example. Let's not have all kinds of conversations happening at the same time. I'm sure they're all interesting and toward the point, but it's not. It's chaotic. So one at a time. Everyone's welcome to talk, but one at a time. So it's called Ratzov V'Shov. Like why on Shabbos or on davening, which are kind of synonymous in a sense. Davening is like a little Shabbos. You block out the world, right? You literally close your eyes, stand in one place, and sort of connect yourself, like trying to get back to heaven. You leave this world behind for a second. That some religions, are trying to do that as a constant state. Like, let's just meditate ourselves because this world is false and phony. We don't want to be here. I want to like sort of reconstruct a scenario where I'm in my source, right? So this is like deep meditation is basically removing yourself, at least consciously, with your conscience, that you're not consciously attached to this reality here. You sort of bring your consciousness back into your source. This is what tefillah is, what Shabbos is. So that's how we sort of respond to that. The only thing is then we have a God who said, well, I didn't make this world for nothing, kiddo. Get back in the game. So then we have to go run and do mitzvahs. But ultimately, this is the whole play of a Jew, is that we'd really naturally be back in our source, other than the fact that the only reason we want to be back in our source, this is going to play into the mimer, is because we want to be with God. Right? That's why we want to go back to our source. It's uncomfortable for me to be outside of God. Why'd you put me here? So I run back. But then when we get back to God, he says, you think I'm here? I'm over there. I sent you on shlichus in Pittsburgh. What are you doing in New York? Right? So if you really want to be close to God, so suddenly it's not about going back into your source. It's about going where God is, where he wants you out there. And that's what we're saying. That's going to be the answer. Right? Even the nature of light is to go back into its source. Nonetheless, what does light do? It shines. Right, which means something's cooking here where light is not in a perpetual state of not being. If it would be, there would be no existence. But what we're trying to say is, what is it that gets light to go against its nature and leave its source like on a constant basis when that's not a natural feeling for the light? Let's go inside. What do you say? Can we? You want one more question? Or? One more, and that's it.
So we talked about how the OTOs machrim et koach mastir, right?
Yes.
So what's the role of the vowels then?
We said actually that's a really good question. We said in the end of last week's class, I didn't get back into it because I didn't really want to go and do a whole ride, but we said that the kol is ma'order the kavana. Remember that line? And we said that when you use your vowels is your voice, not your letters. So we said when you use your kol, you arouse the kavana, but not the kavana of the mind like letters do, the kavana of the heart. Right? Because there's no shaykhs to just like making noise to all of a sudden tapping into that extra special seichel that we spoke about before. The letters are sourced in the osios of the koach hamaskil, because there's like a seichel, some level of seichel in the letters. The voice, they're sourced in this thing called za, so they arouse a kavanah of the lave, which is called reusa deliba. And it's a different quality. In other words, it's also called going down. It's not necessarily called going down as far, right? But therefore, it arouses not so much the seichel, but the heart. He speaks about it in the previous chapter as something even greater than the kavanah of the intellect, just in the sense of that you're trying to fill yourself with a godly experience during davening. The kavanah of the lave and the reusa deliba, because it's connected to this sort of passionate will of the heart, rushing of the heart, it creates a tremendous sensation of excitedness, even more than the kavana that is increased through the letters. But let's go on into our topic because we're literally losing our class here. Okay, so 3 lines down, we just said, what's the deal with light? Why is it shining as opposed to going back into its source? Ki yudua, because it's known. The kol amshachas or gam kemo shenimshach min hamaor hu b'bechines giloy hahelem. That all drawing forth of light, even when it's being drawn from the ma'or, the luminary, it's what we call giloy hahelem, right? It's revealing the concealed. What does that mean? Hu in an ila va'alul. Ila va'alul means cause and effect. Giloy hahelem and cause and effect are, in a certain sense, synonymous. We'll explain them in a second. Ube'ilu va'alul, teva ha'alul lidabek bi'laso. And when it comes to the concept of cause and effect, there is where you find that the nature of the cause is to cling to its effect. So again, we're talking about cause and effect. This is intended to be in opposition to another thing called, this is important, everyone should know this. What's that? Ila va'alul is one system, which is opposite of another system, which is called what? Yesh mi'ayin. Okay, you have yesh mi'ayin, ila va'alul. They're always sort of pitted against each other because they work in different ways. But what he's saying is that when it comes to cause, you're asking for a Rosh Tevas? Ila va'alul. Right? In ila va'alul. So when it comes to ila va'alul, what he's saying is, this is more like sort of Seder Hishtalshalus level light. And the idea is whenever you have one effect coming out of its cause, we call this Gilui HaHelem. What does it mean, Gilui HaHelem? Revealing the concealed, which means that the effect that comes out was actually already inside of its cause, okay? That it was sitting there, almost like we could say like the analogy of the coal that's dimmed down, and there's like a little fire in the coal. When it comes out and shows itself, it's not something brand new, is it? It was already there, a little fire. It was just hidden, and when you bring it out, it's called Giloy HaHelem, right? Which means you're not creating anything new. Yesh me'ayin means what? Something from nothing, something brand new. Ila va'alul does not mean something brand new. It means that something was hidden, and now you bring it out. And in general, what we're saying is when light shines from its source, it is usually a scenario of ila va'alul. The light was already in its source. When it shines, therefore, it's just showing you what was there before. And because of that, it's sort of uncomfortable for it to come out. It would rather be back in its source. It's clinging to its source because it had a prior occupation inside of its source. And therefore, coming out is not really like a big, thank you, sir. It's not a big aliyah, let's say, for it, right? On the contrary, it is merely a yerida. Because why would I want to you might be happy that I'm showing you what was hidden, but the very fact that something has to come and show itself means it's going down, right? It's less powerful when it's revealed because it had to come out of its source. And therefore it's clinging to its source because it was reverberating in a higher level before it had to come out and show itself. And that's why Ilu Ba'alu is always clinging to its source, because it's not really something new. It was already there before, and it would rather be in its previous higher status. You got it? Ki kol ilu va'alu hu be'erech zelazeh. And why? A further point. Every ila and alul, every cause and effect, are what we call be'erech to one another. What does be'erech mean? I'm sorry? Approximately. Comparable, Rabbi Shimon. Comparable means they're not totally of different scales, right? Is 1 comparable to 10?
Yes.
Very much so. Is 1 comparable to 1,000,000?
Yes.
1,000,000,000?
Yes.
Infinite?
Yes.
No.
Zero.
Right? That's where you say, no, it's not comparable anymore. Because 1 out of 1,000,000,000 is still 1,000,000,000th. Like, in other words, it has some measurement vis-a-vis this bigger crowd, this bigger sum. But 1 compared to infinite is nothing.
Well, they're both numbers.
They're not. Right? The concept of infinite is not a finite number. It's different. It's a different type. It's a different breed. Right? Which means that if you have 1 over a billion, you have 1/1000th. If you have 1 over infinity, you have 0. Because you take 1 out of infinite, it's nothing. You haven't taken anything out of infinite. So it's a different scale. So that's what it means be'erech. When you have something which is be'erech, it means you could be much bigger than me, but you're still not. In other words, what's be'erech? Like you can have a genius of a man and a little simple man who hardly knows, but there's still be'erech. But you have even a simple man and a frog, be'ein aruch. There's no comparison, right? You're not in the same ball game. So what we're saying is all light, which is ilu v'alu, is comparable to each other. It might be that the source was a huge amount of light, bria light, and the light that comes out and shines, its effect would be Yetzira, but they're not that far off. Even though there's leagues beyond, Yetzira is bria, it's still what we call be'erech. Every light of ilu v'alu, by definition, is be'erech. They kind of know each other. And therefore, why is that important? Im kein ha'alul margish es ilaso. Therefore, the effect feels its cause. If you're be'erech, it's like you have a shot at the title. The frog does not have any jealousy over your intellect. He doesn't. He doesn't feel that there's a higher thing that maybe he could reach up to it, and therefore he wants to rise up and get it. But a smaller chacham, right, in your chevrusas, one to the other, the guy's chalashing, he wants to be like you because he feels that you're not that high from him. Even though you could be learning in yeshiva for 20 years more than him, he feels like he's got a shot at the title. Because his intellect and your intellect are not that far apart from each other. The effect feels the cause, right? And that's what makes it want to go up and be inside. It feels like that's shaykh to me. If so, the effect feels the cause. This is why light wants to go back into its source. Because the light, which is hidden inside the source, is still of the same erech. It's comparable at some level to the light that came out of the source. Therefore, the light that came out of the source, it wants back in. It feels like it belongs there. It can have a shot at the title. And that's the words mean here. Lazos, therefore, it desires and longs to cling back into its source. And certainly what it does not want to do is distance itself from it and go further down. And here we arise at our question again. What's the deal with light? Right? Why is it shining away? It feels its source. It for sure wants to get back into there. It's completely against the nature of light to shine. It says, God, your God, is a consuming fire. Why is godliness compared to a fire? Because just like fire goes up, so too the godly light is continuously in a state of going up, to go higher and higher, into itself. All the time into itself. Like we said, the soul is like a little flame. It wants out of here. All godliness wants to go back to its source. Lo leired lamata, not to go away from its source, is totally contrary to reality here. Everything spiritual, everything spiritual, it's going up. Let's look at it. We already did look at some of these examples, but let's look at like a person down below. Your soul wants out of here, right? It wants to go up. It wants to be back in its source. Being away from godliness is foreign to your soul. It's not looking to go further down. On the contrary, it's looking to get out. Al karchacha atachai. Absolutely against your will. You even live. Because life itself in a physical form is totally contrary to the nature of your soul. It wants to have a higher life, where it's experiencing life in the source of godliness. It says that there's a burning fire, the flame of Yud K, which is essentially the soul of man, which is like a burning flame, which wants to go back up into its source, as we said.
Well, your soul can't feel that when you're doing the mitzvahs that you're actually reaching a deeper level than it could ever be what it's on top.
So you're jumping ahead, right? Doing a mitzvah. You're saying you want to go down.
But I'm saying, like, why would the body is saying that the soul doesn't want to be in the body But when the body's actually doing what it needs to do, are you like punching that thirst?
So obviously there is an answer to this question, but first we're pointing out that's what we take for granted, which is that it's normal for light to shine, is that it's really not normal for light to shine. The fact that it does nonetheless, and there's some kind of to'elet and positivity to this is what you're getting into, right? That I mentioned it briefly before, that when we get back up there, Hashem says, go back down. Fine, but we'll get to that. Why is it going back down? What's so great about going down when it clings to go up? And it's against the nature to go down, Bichlal. Klois HaNefesh is the natural state of the soul. If your body would get out of the way and you would be like truly free from the bounds of your physicality, you'd have Klois HaNefesh. And that would be an ideal state. You would leave your body. The only reason you don't is because Hashem doesn't want us to. But that's what we want to do, seemingly.
So people want to live.
But this is not life. This is death. Right? Life is real life when the soul is mamash maximizing its understanding and godly reality. And that doesn't happen here. Here is the concealing life.
I mean, we just said it's not life. That's simply the soul thing with Hashem. Life is when the soul is in the body, the body's alive.
Again, it really depends. Is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai alive or dead? It says tzaddikim are more alive in their death than they were in their life. That statement says what I'm trying to say. The fact of the matter is, what we consider life, because it comes and crawls down and enlivens the physical material, basically, of a rock, we're like, oh, it's alive. It's a chiddush that a rock can also have a touch of life in it. But life is not that life, right? Real life is like unbridled life force, which has no limitations. And that's what the soul longs for, because it's be'erech, right? It has an experience of a higher form of life, and it wants to experience a higher form of life, not a lower form of life.
Yeah, but you know how I'm thinking about it is, they say that in the center of the sun's fusion going on, between like hydrogen atoms, like coming together in the middle of the sun, right?
So it's going in, you're saying?
But then there's some particles that are running away.
Yeah.
And all they're trying to do is like fuse together.
Let's see what's happening here. I hear you. It's hard for me to make big science mashalim because I'm not totally up on the whole matter there. But v'kamo halahav sha'ola tamid lamayla. He says, for example, like a flame, it's always going up. Kamo kein hanefesh hu tamid b'chinas hala. So too the soul is always going up. It wants out. V'ule hepech miteba haguf. It has the opposite nature of the body. The body, on the other hand, right, which is gashmias, it does not want to go up, right? Gashmias basically comes down. It's the nature of gashmias to go down. It doesn't experience its source for the reason we said before. Gashmias does not experience its source. Gashmias is like rock, not living things, inanimate things is what we're calling gashmias. They don't experience their source. And therefore, they don't have this ilava alul experience of saying, wait a minute, the real me, it reverberates on a higher level. I want to go up there. The real me is be'ein aruch to the rock down here. And therefore, it doesn't have this longing to go up. And therefore, it's interested in just going down. The gashmis itself does not have the nature of the soul, which is to go up. The goof. And this was all said by the sages in a very succinct way. Ruach ha'adam ha'oleh hi lamayla. Ruach ha'behema hi yoredes lamata. It says the spirit of man goes up, the spirit of animal goes down. That's how they sum that up. What does it mean? The ruach ha'adam hu nefesh elokis. The spirit of the man is really the godly soul. Shabo nikra adam. That's what we call Adam. Adam is called the godly soul. That's what it means. Ruach ha'adam means the godly soul. Kidua, hu b'chinas aliyah dafka, and the godly soul is looking up. It even says that's why God made man upright. We're the only species that basically just goes upright, so we can see the sky. All the other creatures, their gaze is down, because that's where their interest is. They don't have this longing to go back into their source. They're longing to go down. Ruach ha'behema hu aguf, whereas the spirit of the behema, which he says here is really the body, the nefesh bahamis, hu b'chinas yurida, right? It doesn't have this experience of clinging to its source and therefore wanting to experience itself in a higher and higher way. On the contrary, it's drawn to lower and lower things all the time. Mikol makom hari nefesh yored b'nimshach lahachayus zaguf, and here's where we re-establishing our question. Nonetheless, the soul does descend, and it does get drawn down to enliven this body. It crawls into this little rock, totally against its nature, drawn down. If it's going to do it, somebody's got to force it, because it's opposite of its nature. It's not natural. The Kamaimer, I've been saying this like the fifth time, Abal Karcha Atachai, from the Mishnah, against your will you will live. That's what it means. That yes, the sun will shine. Yes, the soul will go into the body, but not naturally. It has to be against your will you will live. Dimasha nefesh chai besocha guf hu bal karchach. This that the soul lives inside the body is against its will. It's not looking to do that. It would rather have klois hanefesh. It just is being forced to be here. Not in accordance with its natural will and essential will. Did someone have their hand up?
Kind of. When you said that there was no comparison with it, right? With the Nashra Bahamas, but isn't the whole point to teach Nashra Bahamas Alakus? So wouldn't that be that there has to be some kind of shaykhs to be able to teach it to enjoy davening and all this kind of stuff?
Teach you to enjoy. I mean, not necessarily teaching it to enjoy the way the godly soul enjoys it. In other words, it's like you're training a dog, basically, right? So it's like you mentioned, like a bird before, a parrot. It's like you're training it to speak like a man, but it's not going to have the experience of a man. But nonetheless, for some strange reason, Hashem wants a dir b'tachtoni. He'd rather have a talking parrot than a talking man. It gives him a pleasure to see that the lower life forms are behaving themselves in accordance with the higher godly realms, and they're, even though it's sort of hiskafia alone, right? But nonetheless, they're making a room for God, right? That you're going to teach this parrot to say Shema Yisrael, or for that matter, you're going to put on an animal skin Shema Yisrael, right? Which is not the same Shema Yisrael of your meditation for an hour before davening. Somehow, Hashem has a great geschmack that the animal skin, an inanimate object at this point, has the name of God imprinted on it. Because it's not because you're trying to get it to be like you are. It's because there's a forcing. Hashem desires for some reason that the godliness should go down into realms which are be'ein aruch, which do not feel the godliness. That's really, so in other words, at some level, because your animal soul is not a parchment, it's a little bit more sophisticated. It's like an animal. It's like a parrot, right? So yeah, and it's even more than a parrot a little bit, because it has actually some emotions that can be worked with. So you have to get its emotions to somehow communicate something that looks like godly emotions. So it also has a geschmack in davening, but it's not the same geschmack in davening that your soul has, right? It's just that you've now really trained this animal to be mamash a mensch. It can be in the house. It's potty trained, right? It like knows how to pray like the rest of the Jews, right? So, but it's still be'ein aruch.
Because is there a comparison adult to the actual soul? What did the animal soul experiencing during davening versus what the soul experiencing?
Yeah. Okay, but here's the question, and we're going to have to end here. We started a little bit late. Mi hu hamachricho. So we're saying, okay, the soul's forced into the body. Who's forcing it? Right? Zehu aguf. The body's forcing it into the body? Who's this body? It's a parrot. What does it have to do? How is it able to force the soul to come into it against its will? Because we're getting back to our original point. Just like speech, which is just a dumb, inanimate thing, basically, somehow has the ability to make genius pour into your otherwise limited chokhmah, so too your goof has the power to force your soul to come out of its happy hibernating home and shine into your body. Because the source of the body is higher than the source of the soul. Wow. Just like the source of the letters are higher than the source of chokhmah. And therefore, so to speak, they forced them to come out. As we're going to see soon, what does it mean they forced them to come out? I'm giving it away a little bit, but I'll just I can't help myself. The idea is that what does light want? It wants to cling to the highest source. So therefore, it actually senses it to some degree that the body has a higher source than it, and therefore it is going up when it goes down. Light doesn't change its nature. It just reorients itself. It's like, oh, I thought I was facing south. I'm actually facing north. And so also when it has a certain hergish and a feeling that the body is higher than it, so it so to speak, is forced to run after the body because it always wants to go to the highest source, the source of light. The only thing is it didn't realize that the source of light was actually in physical things. The intellect doesn't realize that the source of light was in speech, right? But ultimately, when you start speaking, intellect has no choice but to like flood the speech with higher levels of intellect because it's going after its source. You get that? Powerful.
Wow. So what does it want to leave at all times?
It wants to leave until it realizes that it doesn't, which is that it has a higher source to go after, this body, which is really even higher than its own source, right? What do you have? You have the source of light, let's say, is like light inside the sun before it comes out. So it would rather stay there. So the light's clinging to the sun because it wants to get back inside. But then all of a sudden, why is it shining out? Because it realized the sun itself, not just the light inside of the sun. The sun itself is even higher. Can we agree? The sun itself is even higher than the light inside of the sun. When it realized that the sun itself made a goof, therefore the light runs after the goof because it's really trying to get to the sun itself, not to the light inside of the sun. So it has a higher source, which it finds in a lower place. And therefore, speech generates more intellect. And the body generates the interest of the soul to come down here and be here because it's actually trying to go up when it comes down.
Wow.
Chavrusas.